Hello.
Hello.
Um, Thank you so much for coming to our world building webcast today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I see people already in the chat. I recognize some names. I don't recognize others. So hopefully we get to have a really good time for the next hour talking about our stories and writing together. First, I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll give our guest a chance to introduce herself. My name is Mariah. I'm the Young Writers Program Director at NaNoWriMo. So if you don't already know about us, NaNoWriMo is an organization that helps people all over the world write first drafts of their novels. And the Young Writers Program is really cool, I think, so I'm a little biased, because we get to help people under 18, including students in classrooms and teachers, and then young people writing by themselves, set their own word count goals and write whatever project they feel like writing, and really work like authors. So I really love that. If you are a young writer, or if you know a young writer, you can check out our site. There's links below in the description. If you aren't a part of NaNoWriMo yet, you can always check that out. That link's in there too. And if you like videos like this, you can always hit the subscribe button. I think it's a little Viking helmet somewhere on the screen. I'm not sure. You can click that and be added to more videos like this. Okay, so thank you for joining our World Building with Games workshop. No matter what project you're working on, whether you're going to do camp with us or you're not, if you're revising, if you're writing a story or a novel or a script, whatever, and whatever stage it is, we hope that this is really useful for you and really fun. So you're going to need a paper and pencil, and we'll have time to share after the activities, and we'll also have a little bit of time to write. So I've got my notebook. Ding, 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 ding. So if you need to grab one, you could go ahead and take this time to grab it. So I have another note. What was I going to say? Oh, and to start off, why don't you, if you haven't yet, introduce yourself in the chat and maybe say a little bit about the project you're working on. I saw some people did that already. I know people are working on scripts. I saw something set in a fictional village in England with a little magic thrown in. So you can drop in the chat your name, maybe where you're coming from, and what kind of project you're working on today and right now. All right, I'm going to pass it off to our workshop leader, this Naomi Kinsman, Executive Director of the Society of Young Inklings. We're really excited to have her here with us today. So Naomi, welcome.
Thank you. So just quickly, I want to introduce myself as well. I'm an author. I'm a lifelong storyteller. And you'll notice that many of the games that we're playing have a theater bent to them because I also have a theater background. But Society of Young Inklings is another organization that serves youth writers. And we use theater games and a variety of interactive activities to help kids get up on their feet and find ways to step into their character's shoes and understand their story in a new way. And one of the things I think is so fun is often parents will come and sit in the room and they'll think, oh, I want to play these games too. So we always talk about how games are not just for young people, they're for all people. So no matter your age, you're going to have a lot of fun today as we play these games. Now, I'm going to ask you to move around your room a little bit as you're playing these games, but if you're in a really small space, you can certainly do this at your chair as well. You can visualize. There'll be a number of questions that you can kind of picture in your mind, but if you're able to stand up to play, that's going to make it even better. So we'll do that in a minute, but I want to hear what types of projects people are working on.
Oh, okay. So I love hearing that too. We've got Claire from Toronto who's working on a YA novel that's a tad sci-fi, and it's for camp. Camp NaNoWriMo is this event we run in April where you can set your own goal, and maybe you set a goal around pages or time. So that's what she's doing. Let's see. Dell from New Zealand is doing camp, and they're writing sci-fi. Spectra from the UK is working on a sequel to her sci-fi story focusing on aliens and their relationships with humans. And this is their first time ever doing anything nano-related. So welcome.
That's fun. Welcome.
I'm so excited. Sorry Writes is doing a YA story, which is the third and final book in a trilogy. And let me do one more. Let's see. This is such a bad pun. Nature Artist 8012 said, my main character, and they spelled it M-A-N-E, pun intended, is a 3-year-old unicorn colt.
So much fun. I love it.
So we've got some fantasy, we've got some sci-fi romance, which is really cool. Someone's writing their first original fiction sci-fi novel. Welcome, 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 welcome times 10.
Absolutely. And Mariah, you and I were talking about how world building can apply not only to creating the world of a fantasy or something science fiction that's very different from our own world. If anyone's watching this and you're creating something that's set in our real world or historic fiction. The questions that I'm going to ask you, I want you to just think about how you're defining the world of your story and really making it clear for your reader. So even if it feels like your own neighborhood, you're defining what that looks like so you can make that very specific on the page. So the first game we're going to play is a game of choices. And in this game, you can either stand up and move to the side you choose. If you want, you can take a step or two to one side or the other, or you can just point to one side or the other. But as you make each choice, your goal is to make a choice. So you don't want to just stand in the land of indecision in the middle. You want to make sure that you choose something. So the reason why is because sometimes you won't like either choice, or maybe you'll like both choices a lot. And when you force yourself to make a choice, then you start to see who are the exceptions in my world, or what other details does that choice lead to. So notice not only the choice you make, but the other information that pops into your mind as you make the choice. All right, should we play?
I'm excited. I might just like bob my head.
There you go. Excellent.
Which way I choose.
I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see the choices as I go through them. So give me a second while I do this. Here we go. Okay, so this is the game of choices. You can see that, Mariah, right?
Sorry, I muted myself, so it didn't pop to me. I can see it. I'm super excited. And just to be clear, in my head right now, I should like put myself into the head of my main character.
Oh,
in the project I'm working, or
choices are just about your world in general. So as you're thinking about your world, think about the general population as you're making these first choices.
Okay, so just like, for instance, I'm writing the project I think I'm going to work on is a short story set on, this is embarrassing, on King Kong's Island, but like the original movie. So I should just be kind of there.
So yeah, just be thinking about that society as you answer these questions. It will be very clear once you see the first one.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. So your first question is, in general, are the people in your society more rule following? So you can see that's on one side of the screen, or rule breaking on the other side. So you can move your body to one side or point, rule following or rule breaking. And then think about who fits in that and who maybe doesn't, especially as that relates to your important characters in the cast. All right, next up is, are the general populace more high achieving or more relaxed? And if you feel there's a blend, think about if it leans one way or the other, and think about how your character relates to how most people are. When I say your character, I mean your main character. Are the people in your world more creative or more analytical as a general whole? And then think about some of the important characters and think about where they would be on this spectrum as well. All right, next up. Are the characters in the world more generous as a whole or more self-focused as a whole? And think about, can you think of any examples of times when they would be very generous or very self-focused? Or would there be times when they'd be one or the other, and think about what that brings up for you? Next up, are the people in general more logical? Are they going to react with that logical response, or are they more emotional? And what might that look like if I was walking down the street and noticing people? We have two more choices. The next one is, are people in your world quick to react or slow to react? And think about, are there certain circumstances in which they're more quick to react, or some that they're more slow to react? And finally, are people more healthy or more unhealthy in general in your world? And as you think about this, think about how health might express itself. So is that in emotional health and physical health, or a variety of those things? And now I'm going to pop off of screen sharing, and I'm going to just give us all a chance to sit and capture any thinking in our notebook. So you made those choices, you might have written down your ideas, but I want you now to write any specific examples that you can think of. Say, maybe you come up with a scene because you do think people are quite generous, except for in this one circumstance. So you can either bullet point it out, or you can just write a little bit. Let's take 2 minutes actually and write.
Could you flip back to those slides and just like flip through them one at a time, not even reading them, just to review? There were a couple that I just want to remember.
Do you want me to read them out loud or just flip through them?
Just flip through them.
Okay, I will do that right now.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay, 2 minutes to capture any thoughts that you had as you were writing in your notebook or on your computer. And we're going to show those slides again if there was one that stood out to you, like me, but you forgot what it was. Okay, 2 minutes. You got about 30 seconds left, so just jot down any thoughts that came to you about your world or about your characters from those slides. That's my timer for about 2 minutes. Bling! Find that so pleasant. Okay, so if you want, go ahead and drop in the chat anything that came to you from that activity, like if there was one of those choices that stuck out to you, or if there's something else that you thought of, or just basically anything that came out of that activity. So if you didn't do the prompt, but something else came to you about your story, definitely drop that in as well. And while you're sharing, or even feel free to share a couple of the choices that you made for your character. So for instance, I could say relaxed, analytical, generous, logical. I could drop that in there about my society. One thing that I noticed from that, Naomi, was, so I'm writing this story. I started as a novel 2 years ago for NaNoWriMo. It didn't go anywhere. And then this morning I thought, oh, maybe it's a short story actually. Oh. And it was inspired by the original King Kong. And in the original King Kong, when the people land on the island and they're in the middle of a ceremony and they're going to sacrifice this young woman to Kong. But when this new woman appears, they choose this new woman instead, right? She gets captured. That's what's her name? Faye Ray. Okay. But the original girl, you never see her again. But for her, it must have been like this moment where she was about to be sacrificed to Kong, but now all of a sudden, like everything changes. So the whole story's from her perspective and how she kind of like manages the whole thing and then has all this survivor's guilt afterwards for like, anyway. So I'm thinking about this world that I'm building and I was like, they're logical. Like, even though these rules about sacrificing young women to Kong don't make sense to us, like for them, like they're following these rules, you know, they're rule following and they're logical. And like, when they do this, this will happen. And if they don't do this, this bad thing happens. So that was a really cool way to think like, oh, they're actually being logical. They're not being like irrational, which I thought that was really interesting to me.
That is really interesting because when you look at it from the outside, it feels like the opposite of that. But when you step into your character's mindset, you see that totally different perspective. That's cool.
And here's some things that people shared in the chat. Melly L said that she realized there are actually two pretty distinct groups of people in the world. And that was really helpful because she didn't realize that the divide was so great. Okay. And and then Spectre Dust said many murders have been taking place when the book takes place. So everyone is very analytical of everything and everyone and acts quite coldly to each other. So they're just like analyze. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see, what's another one? Oh, Nature Artist 8012 said the rule choice made me realize that I haven't made enough rules for my world, honestly. So that's really interesting. Like rule following or rule breaking.
Right, right.
Huh.
That is one of those things where when you think about the rules in your world, you can really build a lot of conflict and tension around that and make your main character's job a lot harder, because the more rules that they're having to break and the more that's going on, whether it's personal rules or society rules, that can really help. So,
and then one last thing that someone shared is Del Ruby said, my world is falling apart. So this made me think about how they would be changing. So it's like a world in the process of transition. That's so interesting. Oh my God. One thing that comes out of this always is I'm like, well, I want to read that. I want to read that. I want to read that.
Yes. Yes. Me too. I love it. Okay. So I want to remind you, if first of all, this video will still be here, so you can go back to watch those slides again if you wanted to. And one very powerful way to use this exercise is to actually think of what scenes could be sparked by what we just did. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just take a stack of index cards and I will just put one scene idea per card, and I'll do a big brainstorm, and then I'll sort through and decide which ones are most compelling. And I won't worry too much about where they go in my novel, but I just think about what would be a scene to show this aspect of society or that aspect of society. And that can really be an interesting way to unlock new inspiration. Okay, so the next game we're going to play is more of a traditional theater type of game in which you're going to actually move around a little bit like your character. So I'm going to ask you to stand up. You're going to think about moving around, taking on your character's body a little bit. For anyone who this feels a little bit awkward because this isn't your normal thing to do, it's really okay for you to just stand up and then close your eyes and really visualize in your mind. But as you do it, I encourage you to think about the sensory detail. So try to get your body as physically engaged as you can, even if it's just in your imagination, because you'll get more ideas from it. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. So in this game, I want you to actually find a place where you can move. So stand up. You don't have to see the screen. I will have some slides, but you don't really need to see them as you go. So stand up and go ahead and shake out a hand and shake out another hand and shake out your shoulders and your legs just so you feel a little bit looser. And then just start to walk at a regular pace around your room. And I recommend that you don't just walk in a circle. You might want to do a figure eight or just something that breaks up the space a little bit for yourself.
And we've got people in the chat saying like, I'm on a bus. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So like you said, like if you just want to like close your eyes and like imagine in your head. As writers, we do that a lot anyway. So
exactly.
You can do that too.
Okay, here we go. So I want you to take 10 counts and we're going to take on our character's body. So if you're doing this on the bus, remember you can just visualize your body as your character. So first of all, look at your feet. Think about what your main character might wear on their feet. And if you're walking, imagine how that affects the way that they might step, how they might move. And then think about your character's legs and think about their torso from the shoulders to their hips. How would they stand? And also what would they wear on that part of their body on a regular day? And then consider your character's hands. Do they have a specific habit that they often do with their hands, or do they carry something in their hands usually? And then think about their face. Do they have a default expression that they often wear as they're walking around? And as you're moving as this character or visualizing yourself fully in this character's skin, I want you to walk for a count of 5 into a market. So I want you to think about first where people in your world get food. So it could be an open air market, it could be a grocery store, it could just be a distribution center, or maybe there's nowhere people can buy food, so they have to go to a field and find it. Whatever it looks like for you, you're going to walk to that space. I'm going to give you 5 counts to visualize that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you're in that market space, I want you to just take a moment and look above you and below you and on all 4 sides of you. So really take in everything that you can see. Notice the textures and the colors and the shapes. Is there a lot of fresh food there, or do you see a lot of boxes? Are things more historic, or are they technological? Are they just different in some way? And if you're moving around, you can, as your character, go up and actually physically imagine picking things up. You can imagine what they would do in the market. Would they go and smell different types of fruit and decide which one they want to take home? Or would they just walk by everything wishing they could get something? We're going to take a moment to just do a sensory scan. So we're going to think about smells. What do you imagine that you might smell in this space? And what do you imagine you might hear in this space? Would there be voices or the ringing of cash registers? The rumble of that thunder you hear in the grocery store when the water is about to go down on the produce? Think about any textures you could feel, and also think about how your character emotionally feels in this space. Is it a good space for your character or a less comfortable space? And then because this is a market, you can think about taste. Would they be able to taste anything? Is that something that could happen here? Take another moment, look around this space, and while you do, think about how your character would actually act in this space. Would they go and pick things as quickly as possible and rush out the door? Or would they take their time? Would they have to be very thoughtful about what they choose because they don't have very many resources to buy whatever they're getting? And after you've had that moment to think it through, we're going into a new space. So you may want to walk to a new place in your room, or if you are on the bus or anywhere else, just imagine yourself kind of walking through a blank, empty space to an outdoor space. Here we go. 5.
Can we pause 1 second?
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.
I just wanted to like jot down, like I know something came to me just then and I just wanted to jot it down really fast. So
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and jot down any ideas that you have, and then we'll move on to the next setting.
okay. And I know people are dropping things in the chat as well. Feel free to do that. You know, if that's where you're writing, that's good too.
Yep.
Oh my God, I love this.
So fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are dropping in great things too. Like Luna says, my MC would just be on the phone the whole time because she was forced to come to the grocery store with her mom.
That's so good.
That's really fun. And 99th Jedi Warrior says their character is touching the fruit, sniffing it, inspecting it closely like a wolf, unsure if it was food or something else entirely.
Oh.
Cool detail. And Super Mommy 811 says, my character feels uncomfortable because she's not used to shopping with a tight corset and people watching her every move since she's an American.
Oh, interesting.
Harper Nicole says, my character is a doer. Who knew?
I love it.
I love that. Okay. So take us a couple more seconds. You can drop it in the chat or in your notebook, and then we're about to move outdoors. And if your market was already outdoors, like my space was too, just move to a different spot outdoors, maybe.
Yeah, think about a different location your character might go.
Cool. Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
So let's go ahead and take those 5 counts to walk through a blank space into whatever this outdoor space is. I'm about to show you a picture of a forest, so it could be a forest, but it could be any kind of outdoor place, even a playground or some kind of park. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, again, I want you to just take a moment and look above you and below you and on all 4 sides of you to notice what the general flora and fauna are in this space. So is it a lush and vibrant kind of place? Is it someplace that feels like it has been used too roughly? Do you notice any wildlife, or is there a very clear absence of wildlife? And as you're in this space, I want you to notice how your character feels here. Is there a certain tone to this outdoor space? Do You can consider whether every outdoor space has a different tone for your character or whether they're all similar. So maybe they always feel oppressed in these outdoor spaces, or maybe they always feel alive in these kinds of places, or maybe there are certain places that feel frightening and certain places that feel more safe. And let's again do a quick sensory scan. So think about anything you might hear and anything that you could smell. If you want to, you can add in something that they can taste in this space. You could even have your character go and taste something, maybe edible plants. And think about any textures. And before we leave this outdoor space, I want you to imagine something that might show up in this space that surprises your character for some reason. So just take a scan around the space again and notice something. And as you notice it, go over, look at it, think about what it might mean, either for the story or for your character. And then let's just take a moment to let people write again.
Okay. So maybe a minute just to jot down those things.
A minute just to jot down some notes.
Okay. People are sharing some interesting things.
Yeah.
Willa says, Astra's not happy. Someone has been playing with fire in her mother's garden. A patch of flowers that recently bloomed have been burned to the dirt, a black scorch in the middle of a lush green place. That's such an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
Brooke's character Selena feels very grateful wandering around in a big field on the outskirts of a forest because she knows she doesn't have that much time left there. Zara writes says, in a heavy storm, the air is still warm, but there's the smell of wetness all around. Birds are singing as they dry themselves off. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And Jada's main character found a satin high heel shoe in the mud by the river. That's really cool.
Interesting.
Cool. Okay. Nice.
Okay, so we're moving on to an outdoor space. So again, leave behind your forest or your whatever outdoor space you were in, walk through a blank space or visualize yourself going through a blank space. And now we're going to go to whatever is most urban in your story. So some kind of city street, or even if it's just a village street or even a neighborhood, someplace where there are buildings. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now in this space, I want you to once again look above you and below you and on all 4 sides of you and think about the main things that you see. First of all, is it crowded? Are there people all around you? Or is this a pretty desolate kind of place? Do you notice any kinds of transportation, people coming and going in certain ways? Do you notice any attitudes that people have about different ways that people are coming and going? I know in my community there are a lot of scooters and people have a lot of opinions about them. So maybe there's something like that on your street. Notice the general level of dress. So are people quite dressed up, or are they more casual for the people you can see? And also notice the kinds of things that people are carrying. Think about the tone of any interactions that you see between people. So, does it seem like people are paying attention to one another or just walking by without noticing? And because you're thinking about being in your character's shoes, think about how your character feels in this space. Do they feel welcome? Do they feel uncomfortable? Something in between. Notice anything about the architecture that's interesting, the colors of the buildings, the way the street is, any sort of greenery and wildlife that's in the city or in this urban area, or the lack of it. And then just notice your senses again. So notice what you hear, notice anything that you smell, and any last details you might see. Before you leave this space, I want you to notice if there's anything that is written. So there might be a newspaper or there might be some sort of flyer posted somewhere. Go see if you can see something written and see if that might surprise you in some way. Is there something that gives you an interesting insight into what this world is like? And then let's go ahead and take a minute or so to capture our ideas.
I'm going to write it in my notebook. You could write it in your notebook, on the computer, in the chat if you feel like it. Ooh. People are sharing interesting things. I jotted down some notes. Like, my main character goes from this island where King Kong lives to New York City in the end, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I had the idea that like she's not overwhelmed. Like, she just loves it. Like, she finally gets to be anonymous, and her society is run by rules, and we pretend like ours isn't, but she can see, she like picks out all the rules that we're following too. Like, I kept thinking about rules. I don't know, it just was in my head.
Oh yeah.
And then other people are sharing in the chat, like Jada says, my main character is shocked to see her name posted on a broadsheet pinned to a wooden plank next to a doorway.
Ooh.
And Claire says, a seafood shop is really standing out to me. And I think that she thinks that her MC should visit that or check it out, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Harper Nicole says, my character pays attention to the distant details and not so much to the finer ones. Okay. And Christina says, the urban setting is a city shown through my main character's memory only. She's away from home and misses the crowded and happiness of couples on the street. She misses the movies and how she went with her sister. That's really cool.
Yeah. So many different directions that people are headed. It's so fun to see.
Yeah. That's really cool. Cool. Okay.
Okay. So we have one more game that has slides, and then I will be back. So this one is also a visualization game, but we're going to actually head inside of one room, and I'm going to give you some prompts as you go in. So you can either choose a room that belongs to your main character. That can be really useful to go into a bedroom or a hideout or some kind of space that's specific to your character. But you can also choose, if you want to get to know your antagonist better, you can go into a room of theirs as your main character, which is interesting, or as your antagonist if you choose. Or you could just think about a space you're interested in knowing more about. Say, maybe there's a courthouse and you want to know what that's like. So choose a room that you'd like to go into. And You can walk to a new place in your room, or if you're sitting in a place you can't, then just visualize yourself moving to a new space. And I want you to picture the door. So figure out how you're going to go through the door. Do you need to turn a doorknob? Is there a keypad? It might even not be even a door. It could be ivy you have to push aside to walk into an outdoor space. That's a possibility too. So go ahead and walk into the space. And as soon as you do, I want you to notice what is the largest object that you can see. It might be a wardrobe, it might be a desk, it could be a bed, it could be a television, some kind of screen. And go and look at that object and see if you can notice any specific details about it. If it has drawers or something that can open, you can look inside and notice what's there. And then I want you to just take a scan of the room and notice what technology or tools are in the room. So if it's not a high tech society, what kinds of tools do they use? And sometimes it's helpful just to go and imagine looking at each item so you understand a little bit better about how people live, how people use this particular technology or this particular tool. Then think about any objects that show popular culture. So maybe there's a poster on the wall, or there's some sort of memento from some sort of experience. What can you learn about how people live their life? Maybe there's even a magazine in the room. And then I want you to think about any status symbols that are in the space or not in the space. So, is there something that shows that a person has a certain level of acclaim, or maybe because of who your character is, that's not there? And maybe they feel a certain way about that. Then think about any other decorations or furnishings that are in the space. So you might feel that it's a cozy space. This might be a space that's decorated like everyone else's, or if you're noticing specifics about a character, you might realize that in this space, your character is very different than the way many other people in the world might live. And then what objects are related to entertainment or relaxation? I'm looking around my room and I see a lot of books, but maybe in this room there's some sort of screen, or maybe there's a pool table, something that people do for fun. And you might even want to ask yourself what your character would wish was in this space. So if something isn't there, but they do something for fun, think about what they might like to have in their space. And finally, is there anything else of note, either because it is present in this space or because it's specifically missing? All right. So hopefully that sparked some interesting ideas for people as well. We should take a few minutes and capture any more thoughts, unless you think, Mariah, do you feel like people probably got enough time to go?
I think we could take like a couple minutes to jot down or to share in the chat something that came out of that for you. And it's definitely a lot. Like these are a lot of amazing questions. And if it's moving fast for you, like this video will be here, I guess, until the end of the world. So you can always just like
Just
scroll
come back
back.
and look at them again. Yeah.
Yeah, and like look at them again, pull up the ones that like that inspire you or the parts that you missed. So maybe just a minute or so to jot down some things or drop it in the chat.
Okay. I will go back and flip through those slides just for anyone who wants to see them again while you're doing that.
Cool. And I think I'm going to jot down some ideas that I had when you said entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And then the tools. I also thought about that.
Thanks.
I just had an idea.
I love it.
Okay. So my two things that came to me is when you said tool, I thought of this like hairbrush that her mom used to use on her. Both her parents are dead, that her mom used to use on her. And then when you said games, for some reason this popped into my head. I don't think it exists. It was like a game with pegs and rings, and it's like checkers, but it's like it's different. And I was like, her dad carved that for her, and her dad is missing at sea. And I was like, where did that come from? But it popped into my head.
I love it.
And some other people, someone's in an interrogation room with 2 large gray chairs and a steel table. I messed that up. Someone's, where did it? Someone has, their status symbol is this ratty teddy bear that she still drags around at 11. Someone said captain the lights are dim in the lab. A few different breeding colonies of crickets are corralled off in separate glass containers. And at the far end of the room is the dehydrator, and beyond that, the mill. That's so interesting. Let's see. Let me do one more. Oh, interesting. Ava, but backwards, said, my MC went into this huge circular dorms filled with many beds and a huge fireplace in the center. To show status, etched into the 4 poster beds are symbols. And the society hides things under their beds. See, again, I would read all of these.
Right? Me too. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the last exercise we're going to do is going to be drawing a map. So this first map we're going to draw is a really high level map. I want you to be thinking as a map maker as you're working on this. So just drawing quick symbols and labels. And then you may find that you like this so much that you want to go in and label or really focus in on different locations. But for right now, I want you to think about the entire world of your story. But I need to give you a caveat with this, that if your story takes place across a universe, you may want to choose the part of the story where your character begins so you can get a sense of their society. So as you've been thinking about, like Mariah, you've been talking about this island. So the island might be what you're putting onto your map. So the first thing I would do is I would just draw a bounding box, or you can draw a blob, whatever you think is the most right way for you to communicate the outside shape of your space. This is a big circle, so don't overthink it. Okay. So, and by the way, I should have said, just grab a blank piece of paper. To do this, you want as much space as you can grab. So draw your bounding box.
And some people are having like mild drawing-induced panic attacks in the chat about their drawing abilities, which I totally I feel for that. Like I'm going to try to draw. I'm going to make it as like messy. I'm just going to be okay with it being messy. Yeah. But if you really hate drawing, you could write, or you could use this time to like pick something that we did earlier and do that.
And think about, you can have a box for a home, or you can have a little V for a mountain. It doesn't have to be detailed. As long as you understand it, that's it. So first you want to start with an X for where your character's home is. So figure out where home base is. Now for some of our characters, they don't have a home in the story for whatever reason. So think about where they might sleep on the first night of the story. So you get them grounded somewhere on the map. And then I want you to label any places where friends and or extended family might live. So if there's a neighborhood or other homes that are important, you can add those. And then I want you to think about, we went into the market, so thinking about food and water. So where people actually get these things. And if you want to think about how the mechanics of the society work, you can think about where any water purification might be, or where is there a garbage dump, anything like that that needs to be put onto your map.
Mine's amazing. Just wanted to share.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay, so now think about how people learn in the world. There might be a school, a university, there might be a training field learn. And especially think about this, even if it doesn't happen in your story, nobody goes and learns anything. Still, it's helpful to know where these things are in the world. And then think about where people work. So there may be an urban area, a downtown area. People could be scattered across the society, working in different places. You can just make a couple hotspots if that's helpful. We talked about relaxation. So now I want you to think about places people might go for fun. So there might be a sporting arena, there might be a movie theater, there might be a roller skating rink, there might be just a park or a lake that people sit by, something fun. All right. Next up, where people empower, live, and rule. So is there a certain neighborhood where people empower live? Is there a castle? Is there a courthouse? And while you're at it, you might want to think about if there's a jail or a dungeon or any place where people go when they are in trouble. Think about the most important outdoor areas. So, is there a mountain range or a forest or a swamp or any sort of detail that you think you want to add outside? Maybe there's a volcano. And then again, think about any urban or places that might have buildings, any indoor places that you want to label. Note where people gather supplies. So, are there strip malls? Are there actual malls? Are there little markets? Do people have to go out into the field to get the supplies that they bring home? And then I want you to think about looking over your map. Is there a most dangerous place on your map? Is there a place that all people avoid or just your character avoids? When I do this with my students, they always say, well, there's more than one dangerous place. It really is okay if you labeled more than one. But I always like to put maybe two X's by the one that's the most dangerous so that I know which one is the one that's most emotional for my character. And then do the opposite. So, what feels most safe or comfortable to them? It could be home or it could be something else. And you'll notice that I ask this question a lot, but I find it really useful. So look around and see, is there anything surprising in your world that maybe you haven't thought of adding yet, but you want to add now? Maybe there's a statue you weren't expecting, or maybe there's some kind of store of interesting objects that you didn't necessarily think of. A place where people get certain awards. And then before we leave the map, you may have some other locations that happen in your plot that you think, oh, but I need to make sure this is on the map. So if there's something that you know happens, there's a ceremony that takes place in a certain field or something, make sure you get that down too. All right. Now, usually when I do this activity, I encourage people to look around their setting and notice what scenes that the map makes them start to think of. Because often when you look at all these places, you think, oh, I could set a scene here. Or you might reimagine a scene you've already written in a more interesting location. I think it's sometimes interesting to think about. Often I'll have conversation scenes where I just feel like it's not so interesting. So I want to put it somewhere that's a little bit more unique in some way or that changes the tone in some way. And so I'll choose to put the scene in a different place. So if you want to, I would encourage you to take maybe 2 minutes and write down any thoughts that you have about ways you could use the locations that you have on your map. And put stuff in the chat too, your ideas about where you can put things.
Yeah, people have already dropped a couple of pretty interesting things. So
Great.
if you're still working, don't worry about the quality of your map. I wish you could. There you go.
Yeah.
There's mine. That was my second attempt too, because I ran out of space in the first one, so just don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, don't be embarrassed.
And I'm going to spend a minute dropping some ideas of scenes, because I think that's really an interesting idea, like where different scenes could be. But whatever you're doing, just a minute to collect your thoughts.
Yes.
Clarissa Chu just discovered where the crime took place, which is really cool.
Ooh.
Jada R says the central courtyard has stones which are kept red hot for the boiling water, and kids show off by dancing across.
Oh, that's fun.
That's really cool. Let me see how I can share a couple more. People avoid this. Supermommy811 says people avoid it because it's an eyesore, an abandoned cottage that is presumably filled with dangerous animals. But my MC goes there a lot. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Very, very, very cool. Someone said that they're Supermommy811 again says they're just separated by east and west. East is where the wealthy people live, and west is middle class to working class. Very cool. And Ava backwards, my last comment will be mine is a huge school in Virginia surrounded by gardens, and beyond that is a huge woods. Inside of the woods is the meetup site. Inside of the school is separated by wings. That's really cool. I love it. I would read all these. Okay.
So that was our final game for today, but I want to talk big picture for a second, because when we think about playing theater games, we might think of being performative or being funny. But one of the fun things about this is that just getting up on your feet, and for those of you who are on the bus, you didn't fully have that experience, I know, but you can consider getting up and trying this at home sometime, because it's actually so fascinating to see what you discover when you're not sitting in a chair, because we're so often sitting in a chair when we're writing our stories. We can really maybe tap into a different part of our intuition when we stand up even. And the other thing I want to point out is that a lot of what we did today is just answer a number of questions, but we answered them from the point of view of our character, and we kind of went through them quickly. And all of those interesting things that you read in the chat comments, I think are all such great inspiration for scenes that you might want in your own story. Somebody has this idea about the hot coals in the middle of town and how people show off. That's such a great question. Then in your world, how do people show off, right? So thinking about what other things that people's comments and creativity spark for you.
People are pretty excited. Anya L, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, says brilliant webcast, guys. Clap emoji, clap emoji, clap emoji. And people are being pretty excited about the chat. They're excited to start their camp projects. If you joined late and you don't know what camp is, there's a link in the video description. It's an event that's going on in April online. Brooke T is just excited in general, which I love. I feel kind of excited too. And at the beginning, I said I thought I was going to make this a short story, but now I really want to make it a novel, because I feel like I'm just excited about it, and I want to keep writing. So we have a couple minutes left, about 6 minutes if we want to make a full hour. Mm-hmm. If you guys have any questions, either about world building or about camp or about theater games, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I can pull a couple and ask Naomi or answer myself. Jada missed the beginning. Who are you two? She asks. I'm Mariah. I'm the director of the Young Writers Program at NaNoWriMo. So it's our site for people under 18 to work on writing, which is, I think it's great. And then you can introduce yourself.
And I'm Naomi Kinsman. I'm the executive director of Society of Young Inklings, which is an organization that empowers youth writers. We actually publish youth writers. And I'm also an author myself.
Cool. I should say that. I'm also a writer.
You are, yes.
Very cool. So I'm not getting too many questions in the chat. I just see a lot of people saying things like, I have a new scene I'm excited to write. I see my world pretty clearly now and beyond. Thank you. So Nature Artist 8020 or 8012 says they need a name for the main character's herd of unicorns. So anybody has any ideas? Blinky. Wait, is it a name for each of them or?
Herd.
Brooke T says, so if I have a question, if I type my novel plot in the chat, will you give me feedback? We'll just tell you it sounds great. We're not doing constructive feedback right here, but I bet you could find a group in the forums or on the Camp NaNoWriMo cabins if you wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. NaNoWriMo, so Catherine, who's moderating the chat, said, it's a glory of unicorns. So I wonder if she actually knows that, like if that's what a herd is called.
That could be what a herd is called. Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past her.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So Logan, I'll just give you another compliment because we don't have any questions. We just have compliments.
Okay.
Logan says, I had such total bare bones for this concept. This has been a great exercise to get me excited and thinking about it as an actual story.
Great.
Very cool. Well, in our last 4 minutes, I guess we could, now the chat, people are just excited to talk about glories of unicorns.
Oh, of course they are. Well, I do want to say that I put together a little PDF that has a number of additional questions for you. So if you feel like some more questions in this vein would help you out, there is a link where you can just download it. You don't have to put in an email or anything. It's just there for you. So you're welcome to check that out. And if you know any young writers, please encourage them to check out Young Inklings and in camp. So
Young Writers Program, yep.
Yeah,
and the PDF you mentioned is linked to in the description of the video, so below. And we do have one question. So Devin Schumacher says, have you ever tackled several languages, like making up fictitious languages?
Have you?
Have I?
Yeah.
No.
I've created fantasy before in which I've created particular words. And often what I'll do is I'll go back to the roots, the Greek and Roman roots of things, or Latin roots, so that I can see, what makes sense or what feels right. And I'll do that, but not a whole language. That feels quite a lot to me.
This project, the kind of King Kong project that I tried to do for Nano 2 years ago and really didn't work, I realized it's because I've never done a whole fantasy novel and there was too much I didn't know about the world. Like every time I had the character move to a new place, I was like, oh, what is she wearing? What's the history? What's the language? And it was just overwhelming for me.
Right.
So this webcast has been really useful for that. And I think there's probably other resources out there for creating languages. One piece of advice that I got from another writer who just has a sci-fi novel coming out soon, she said that she got the kind of less is more advice. So rather than having full sentences in fictitious language, just dropping in like a word every so often, and going that route rather than going the J.R.R. Tolkien route and creating a new language.
Yeah.
Hannah says, I'm having trouble imagining the architecture of my world. Any tips on how I could go about figuring that out?
So one thing I love to do is I love to go on Pinterest and just start to look at different kinds of architecture, and I make, a board of different possibilities. Even if it's completely a fantastical world, there's sometimes something really whimsical in our world that will allude to it. And sometimes finding really contrasting things, such as a really ancient kind of architecture and then something that's high tech. If you think about putting those two together, you're able to see something that's a little bit different. And also breaking it down. So thinking what materials, is it stone? Is it metal? Is it, so if you start from the base piece of it, I think to what you were saying before about world building being such a challenge, I think one of the reasons why is because we have cognitive overload. We're thinking about so many things. So as we're trying to tackle one question, then 3 more pop on the top of it, and it's hard to focus on any one question. So I try to find whichever one is easiest to answer first, and then I use if then thinking. So if this is true, then what? And then if that is true, then what? And then just kind of follow it along.
One thing that I'm sure a lot of you probably also do is if it's something that's not totally essential to the story and I want to keep my narrative moving, I'll just have chunks of like, fill this out later. Like I'll say, a lot of my novel right now is like, they passed under a name of tree. Like, I don't want to break my writing to look up what tree it might be.
Right.
So I think that's another thing you could do. Like, if you don't quite have those details locked down again, that could be a second draft pass. Very cool. Okay, it's been an hour. Thank you so much for coming, Naomi, and thank you to all of you in the chat. This has been a really exciting, it's been a chatty kind of chat, which I really love. I get to hear a lot about your stories and your ideas and your questions. So thank you. Naomi, do you have any last words?
I just want to thank everyone for their creativity. I love seeing how many different ideas come out of some simple questions. It's really fun to see how your creativity was sparked in so many directions.
Cool. You can come back to this video, of course, if you want to review anything, and you can also subscribe to our NaNoWriMo channel. It's either here or here, I don't know, to see more videos like this in the future. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.